Hey everybody, this is Michael Steinhardt for All Analytics, and I'm joined by our editor-in-chief, Beth Schultz. How are you, Beth?
Fine, Michael. How are you doing?
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I'm very pleased to welcome our guest today, the founder and CTO of WegoWise, Barun Singh. Barun, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit about the WegoWise mission?
Sure. Broadly speaking, our mission is to improve the efficiency of the built environment. So, kind of a little bit more specifically, we have been working to build a really affordable and intuitive way to understand how buildings perform and to understand where we should be investing in buildings for retrofits. And we've been basically driving the market for building efficiency. That's what we're all about.
I understand that WegoWise is a relatively new company, but it's rapidly grown into the industry leader for this sort of quantified building.
Yeah, and we've been doing this for about 4 years now, and we've seen a lot of growth in that time frame. And I think we've seen a lot of success stories, which is kind of what's driven a lot of that growth. And yeah, we're really excited about it.
So we're going to talk about some of those success stories a little bit later in the broadcast. I would like to remind everybody in the audience that we have the Q&A feature enabled. So as the conversation continues, if you have questions for Barun or for Beth or for myself, just pop them up into that Q&A box, and we'll address as many of them as we can on the air. If we don't get a chance to answer your question, then we'll try to respond via email. Or here on the Google Plus page as well. So thanks everybody for joining us, and I know that Beth had a couple of questions, so let's turn it over to Beth.
I do, and thanks, Michael. And welcome, Barun. It's great to have you here. So let's say I'm a homeowner, or maybe I'm a building manager. How do I get started with WegoWise? How do I sign up? How do I start using it? And I should say, as a homeowner, can I use it, or is this really for commercial space?
As a homeowner, you absolutely can use it. Our biggest user base is multifamily building managers and owners, but we actually help run a couple programs across the country for homeowners as well, and we do have some commercial customers as well. But the sign-up process is kind of the same way you would with any other web application. You can go onto the site and sign up that way. It really is a self-guided process to get going. So you would start off after you've signed up by defining a building, entering some simple building characteristics. If you're a homeowner, we ask for very few things in terms of basically square footage of the building, number of bedrooms, things like that, whether you have gas heat or electric heat. And that's really stuff that helps us normalize data to do apples-to-apples comparisons as well as benchmark data, which I can talk about a little bit later, but basically a way to help you figure out which buildings are like yours and compare your usage to theirs. And then you give us the login credentials for your utility company, and we automatically pull in all of the utility data. And so all of the actual data, the data crunching and everything happens behind the scenes. For our customers who have a large portfolio of buildings, oftentimes we set up a process for them. They certainly can sign up, and some do on their own and just get going. A lot of times we will work with them to get that process as streamlined as possible.
So that sounds great. I mean, we're taking a poll of our audience right now on the site, and it's one of the questions is, if you had the data, you want to make your home more environmentally friendly, more, be more conscious about energy use, but you don't have the tools. And it sounds like you provide the tools. You make it pretty easy for me or anybody else to do this, right?
Yeah, and I should be careful here. What we are really about is we deal with the information side of things, right? So we're an information company at the end of the day. And so the information helps you make decisions about what you should do and where you should invest. You still need to go and make the investment and do the retrofit. We're all about driving retrofits. And so it's really about helping people understand whether or not it's valuable to invest money in a building and how much they can expect to save if they were to make their building more efficient.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that data and go into the analytics side of things. What's going on in the back end? What kind of tools are you using? What kind of analysis are you running?
Right. So it's mostly homegrown tools for us, and the analytics, generally speaking, involves two components. There's data collection, and then there's the actual analysis you do of the data. So for the data collection, as I mentioned before, we pull data automatically from utility companies, and our data collection infrastructure is basically the best out there, where essentially every minute we're importing data for about 30 utility accounts, and that comes from any source, web pages, PDF files, whatever. And when we get all that data together, then we do a lot of data quality stuff on an automatic basis to make sure that the data makes sense, and to align the timetables properly and everything. And then on the back end, we basically do all of the analysis seamlessly and automatically. So for example, we are literally continuously running benchmarks on our entire data set. So if you were to go onto WegoWise and say, how much, show me a graph of the median gas usage for 10,000 square foot wooden steel frame gas heated buildings in Boston, we would be able to tell you what that is. And that's because we're kind of constantly updating that based on new data, because we're constantly getting new data from utility companies. If we get new information for a specific user, or let's say your home, you get a new utility bill, we'll have that utility bill in WegoWise in very short order. And if you are a multifamily property manager, for example, you might tag those buildings in a certain way or aggregate them in certain ways. We automatically do, behind the scenes, all of that analysis to aggregate things properly. We do a little bit more advanced analyses to separate out end use. So for example, you may have a gas heating system, and we can tell from your gas data, looking at outside temperature data and with the model of the building, what your gas load is, what component of your bill is related to, your heating or your cooling in the summertime. And so all of that analysis involves doing some more advanced regressions and error handling, and we do all that seamlessly behind the scenes as well. So most of our analysis tools are in-house, written in Ruby and Python. Most of them are integrated in some way into the application. A lot of them users have access to when they're looking at the site. Some of them are integrated in the application we use kind of for admin purposes for special reports. And every once in a while, we need to run custom analytics that we haven't yet had a chance to integrate into the application itself. And so we use, either run our own database queries for that and write our own scripts, or sometimes we use something like Chartio, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, basically to interact with our database and generate some graphs. So that's kind of on the side of running analyses to help our customers understand how their buildings are performing and to help us understand things. We have some separate tools that we use for things like understanding how our users are engaging with the site. So we might use Mixpanel for that. So we have some other standard analysis tools that basically just help us iterate on user experience on the site.
Okay.
So when you talk about using weather data, for example, and applying that sort of in the context of what was happening in the building at a given time, what sort of third-party feeds are you drawing on?
So we pull weather data from a couple different sources. Lots of times we'll get it from Weather Underground. We'll get it from the U.S. The government has its own weather stations and data available online for that. So we get whatever is basically most reliable, and we narrow that down to for a specific zip code. So the weather data we're getting is going to be for the region that a person is in, and that's really important because I'm in Boston right now, for example. The weather, if you're right by the water, is actually can be quite different from the weather if you're just 5 miles inland.
Sure, and being in New York, the weather is uniformly miserable regardless of where you are. But so you had mentioned earlier that there were a couple of really sort of notable and also compelling success stories. So let's get into a couple of those if you have a moment.
Sure. So one of the kind of biggest success stories, just in terms of scale, is we identified over $580 million in energy savings for affordable multifamily properties in Massachusetts through the MassSave program. So that was basically a multi-year utility program that was designed to help spur investment in these buildings. And what happened was we used WegoWise to benchmark all of those buildings and say, this is how this building is performing, this is how much savings you can expect to gain if you make an investment making this building more efficient. And I know that's kind of been a model for some other utility programs, and it was really a success in helping the utilities think about new ways to run these programs a little bit more effectively than maybe they would have. a lot of our success stories are just for the people who own and manage these buildings. So in San Francisco, for example, there's an organization called Chinatown Community Development Center. They're an affordable housing provider, and we we used our measurement verification functionality built into the application to basically confirm a 20% reduction in water use, which resulted in $40,000 of annual savings for them. In Massachusetts, Homeowners Rehab is another multifamily developer. They use WegoWise to identify the least efficient buildings in their portfolio, 68 properties. They're now saving $218,000 a year by their estimate in utility costs as a result of having access to this data. Peabody Property is another one. They tracked 10,000 units in over 100 properties. They implemented a bunch of retrofits. They're saving over $1 million in water and gas. Corporate Properties is saving about 21% of their electric bill annually and 32% of their water bill annually, 345,000 gallons saved as a result of this stuff. So for all of these, these are organizations that have an interest in making their buildings more efficient. And this is interesting that I should step back here and give a little bit of context for the organization, for WegoWise. So I have two co-founders, and one of my co-founders is New Ecology. They are really a sustainability organization. They know these buildings. They go into these buildings, run audits, and help people understand what they need to do to retrofit things. Another thing is Boston Community Capital, and they are also a nonprofit focused on kind of mission. Their mission is around low-income communities, and sustainability as a part of that. But they know a lot about how the investments work in these buildings. And my background is a technical background, right? Building the product, understanding user experience, user interface, and all that. And the reason why that's relevant is because in order to see these kind of successes, you really need all of those pieces working together. You need to have not just the technology, but you need to know what matters in terms of what you need to analyze in a building. So you need to know what the market is like for investments in those buildings, so that you can tell people things that they're actually able to act upon. And it's a lot of how we started this. There's certainly a mission around sustainability, but there's also a central part of our mission is around making this universal. And that's why you hear me mention the affordable housing angle on a couple of those, because that makes it really easy. If even affordable housing can afford to see these successes, everybody can. So we kind of see this across the board. And if there's time, I actually have a really a fun graphic that we've done on our data.wegowise site that shows kind of one specific customer in a really fun way. But while I pull that up, I'll let you guys give any calls on that.
Cool. Yeah, we definitely love to see that. I'm sorry, Beth, you had a question?
I would just wanted, Barun, can you repeat the name of the first co-founder? I didn't quite catch that.
New Ecology.
New Ecology.
Yep. And the other one is Boston Community Capital. Yep.
Okay. So obviously those two co-founders had vested interest, but how do you go about building sort of the kind of more broader scale energy awareness and getting folks interested in this that aren't in that community, that whether that's that New Ecology community or the Boston capital community?
No, that's a great question. So when we first started out, so 4 to 5 years ago, we would go to these conferences and we would be telling people, hey, you should really benchmark your buildings. You should understand how they're doing in terms of their utility consumption, because this is usually your biggest controllable cost in managing a building. It's what you can do the most about. And we would have to explain to them and show them why that was a good thing to do. That isn't really the case anymore. I mean, that goal has largely been reached, in the sense that people who own and manage buildings, largely speaking, at this point in time, they've seen enough evidence to know that there's a lot of savings to be had in making buildings more efficient. So it's really a matter of helping them understand how they can do that in a reasonable way, in a way that works with their time constraints, their money constraints, and helps them keep focused on the things they want to keep focused on. Because this is where the likelihood, so just to give you context of what was the status of how things were set up before. So before any tool like WegoWise existed, if I have, let's say, a portfolio of 100 buildings that I oversee, then even if I know I want to invest in them to make them more efficient, I know somewhere in that 100 buildings I've got real opportunity for savings. I don't know where. So I would have to basically get audits on all 100 buildings. Audits is about $3,000 a pop, so you're looking at spending over $250,000 just to get the information about what to do next. And so it's, if we can solve that problem for them, then we can really do a lot to move the market, and that's what we're seeing.
Okay, thanks so much. So I know you wanted to show us a little graphic, but before we get to that, you talked about $580 million in identified savings.
Right.
So identified savings are, where you say if you retrofit, if you invest, if you do X, Y, and Z, you stand to save these millions of dollars. But to what extent are those actually, actionable? To what extent are those you can identify the top priority buildings, the ones that will yield the most ROI, for example, and sort of the specificity in terms of what the retrofit would require, and to what extent are the municipalities taking advantage of that?
That's a very good question. So in all of the examples I gave, except for that for $580 million one, everything was talking about things that were actually done to save energy or water.
Sure.
In the Mass Save program, the reason why it was stopped at identifies that when you have a very large program like that, it's just not practical to go through and make all those retrofits in a short time frame. There's just so much work to be done. So basically, we help the way that utility efficiency programs have worked in the past is really guessing. Honestly, a lot of it is just, we'll give you these light bulbs. We're going to assume that you're going to put them in and that you're going to save X kilowatt hours per year for replacing an incandescent with CFL. And you don't really even know that that's an actual savings because somebody might have already had CFLs and you might just be giving them free light bulbs. And more than that, it's very rarely the best type of investment to make. So this is about helping the municipalities, helping the state regulators, helping the utility companies figure out better ways to spend that money, more efficient ways to spend that money. And we are seeing some movement that, it's that domain, the public domain, is a little bit slower to move than the individual property manager. It's just the nature of the beast, if you will.
Sure.
But we see that as kind of the first step. If we can show you that this is what you could be doing, our goal on a broader scale for these things is that we want to move policy, right? We want to see these programs be implemented in a way that produces much better results.
Sure.
Results in a lot more savings, which is what I think everybody who's implicitly paying into the programs from the utility bills, that's what they want to see too.
And that actually goes to a question that Beth wanted to ask about the broader adoption and the grander scheme of actually seeing in the data.
Yeah.
A chance to.
And this is where I will kind of switch it over to the visualizations that I want to show you, because we have some visualizations specifically that talk to this. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is something we built called data.wegowise.com, not the individual customer application, but rather we're now collecting so much information that we can start trying to understand things about how buildings are performing in aggregate, broadly speaking. So before I get to your question about the larger scope of the opportunity for savings, I just wanted to show you this one. This is just a cute little graphic that shows this is an actual customer of ours, their water consumption over time. And so the bottom is a polar chart. I don't know if you can see, but it's kind of fun because it looks like the flushing water down the drain. But it starts in 2007. They started using WegoWise right here, right close to the middle of 2009. And what they learned in looking at their portfolio was that this particular building was using about four times as much water per square foot or per bedroom than any of their other buildings, and all their buildings were basically identical. And they realized they just had a lot of leaky fixtures in the building. And so they went in and they said, okay, well, this is crazy. We're going to fix some of those things. And over a period of 2 or 3 months, they fixed them. And you can see how drastically their usage dropped, right? And the funny thing is that at the end of this, their usage right here this was the most efficient building in their entire portfolio at the end of the work, because it's not as though their entire portfolio was incredibly efficient, just that this one was particularly bad. And so this type of drop is really where the opportunity lives. So it's less about making every building 5% more efficient. It's really about saying we've got these outlier buildings, and there are a surprising number of them that we can improve their efficiency by 50%, 60%, right? They can be using a third of what they were using before. So this is kind of on an individual basis. But then we also did some analyses of thinking about, for example, if we look at water, how much water could we save? And the way we look at this is, if you can see this light blue graph.
Yeah, it's coming through clear.
This is basically a histogram of how water is distributed in terms of gallons per bedroom per month. And you can see there's the relatively smooth curve, but then you've got this very heavy tail at the end. What this means is that you've got some number of buildings that are particularly inefficient. So if we said, what we did analysis of was to say, if apartments became as efficient as the top 95%, so you just take 5% of the least efficient apartments in Massachusetts, and you make them as efficient, you make them slightly more efficient, you would save 47 million gallons per month of water. More realistically, if you made everything go to the median and said that everything gets to be at 50%, you're talking about saving 724 million gallons of water per month, right? We have some fun little things here saying that's 731 Olympic swimming pools, 2.7 minutes to flow the Mississippi, 1.6 Gillette stadiums. We do the same thing for California, and California is even more drastic. It's 2001. It's almost 2.2 billion gallons of water per month that we can be saving, just by taking the half of the buildings that are least efficient in terms of their water use and making them as efficient as the median building today, which is not particularly efficient. So we're talking about billions of dollars if you kind of add all of this up across the country. And as we're looking at resource shortages now and in the coming decades, this is really quite a big deal.
That's crazy when you think about, in a drought-prone state like California, what a difference really paying attention to that can make for those folks. I would imagine.
Yep.
And I was kind of wondering, as you were showing that first visual, the kind of the flattening out of the water usage. As buildings start to, maybe we start to see problems with leaky faucets, again at a larger scale, I imagine that's easy to track from that perspective as well then, right?
Right. So it's important to understand that buildings are not static entities, right? You may fix a building and 6 months later something else breaks, or the thing you fixed, maybe the installation wasn't done correctly or the part was defective. So it really is important to look at this data as a matter of tracking things as they're happening and keeping on top of what the biggest problems are on a regular basis, and you can do something about it.
And so you said you've been in existence, you've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, right? Is that what you said? And so are you finding from the data that there is sort of sustained efficiency in green operations?
Absolutely. What we find is that once a property owner or manager starts down this path of seeing where they can make improvements, then they realize how easy it is. Then they are all invested in seeing those savings sustained, and they're all actually, it becomes kind of, I don't want to say like a game, but it becomes something that is really fun and interesting to them. That what more can we do? And the benchmarking angle becomes really relevant because people want to be seen as the more efficient buildings. They don't want to just be at the median; they want to be at the top quartile, whatever it may be. And really, the thing that's been preventing them from doing that is just a lack of access to where to invest and what to do with that. So yeah, we definitely see a sustained effort in that, and a lot of that is why we focus so heavily when we're building the product on user experience and user interface, because we really want this to be a product that people fundamentally enjoy using. Right? Oftentimes, when you're dealing with businesses and organizations, they're used to using unpleasant products because they have to. We want to give them something that they really enjoy using so that they keep on trying to do more, which is going to drive more efficiency.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, one of the things that occurred to me when you were showing some of the outlier analyses that you can generate from the software is that this is the sort of thing that contractors might want to use when they pitch a job to a particular holding company or a building manager or even to a homeowner. They can
Yeah.
say, hey, you know, we loaded your home into WegoWise, or you opted in to load your home into WegoWise, and you know, we'll have you saving $500-600 by the end of the week, for
Yeah,
example.
absolutely. And so our customer is basically anybody who engages with the efficiency of the building. So oftentimes the people who sign up are, like I said, the property owners and managers, but oftentimes they're service providers, the people who do the audits. You know, the more successful we are, and I think this may go back to a question that one of you asked earlier, we do not replace the audit. That's the kind of important thing to realize. The data simply isn't there to replace the audit. So for example, we can tell somebody your heating usage is a lot higher than what it should be perhaps, but what we can't tell them is that that's because the heating system is not working well, or because it's installed incorrectly, or because people are leaving their windows open, right? There's all sorts of reasons why that could be, and you really need to go into the building to diagnose it in detail. So the more successful we are, the more work there is for audits to do, right? Our goal is there should be a lot more audits happening in this country. There should be a lot more retrofits happening in this country. The economic incentives are there, and it's politically, I think, something that people want on both sides of the aisle. And it's a very cost-effective way to see these sort of savings that also creates jobs, helps the economy, all this sort of stuff. So the contractors are our customers, the auditors are, the homeowners are, even the banks and the finance agencies that are giving out loans to make these changes are customers of ours, and we have certain products that are aligned to them. So you know, our goal is to help everybody. Our goal is to make the market efficient, right? To align the information available to buyers and sellers so they can make smart, rational purchasing decisions.
So, Varun, what do you? I mean, you've given us a lot of kind of points here, but what are your real? What's your real advice then? If I want to get started, what how can a homeowner or a building owner? What are some of the first things they can do to increase their efficiency?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, the first thing is to understand how the building's doing. The first thing is to understand where it's inefficient, if in fact it is inefficient, and how much. And that's kind of where, the benchmarking side of things, the tracking side of
Okay.
things. Once you know that, then it's a matter of saying, once you know if you've got, let's say, a building owner, that this is where I need to pinpoint my efforts, then you bring an auditor on board for looking at that particular thing. And where we pick up at the end of that is helping do the measurement verification, though we are increasingly getting into the entire processing information flow. But it really is about understanding what the current situation is in order to make a decision on what you should do next.
Excellent, thank you. I noticed that I do want to interject and remind the audience that we still have the Q&A function enabled. Most of the questions that came in were about, hey, is this thing on? Have we started yet? And the answer is yes, we have. But one person did ask about whether this is going to be archived and whether the visualizations that we've shown are going to be available. And the answer is A, it'll be archived on YouTube, and it will also appear on allanalytics.com. And the visualizations that Barun was showing us are at data.wegowise.com. Is that correct?
Yep. I'll just share my screen again so folks can see the address bar. But it's just data.wegowise.com, and then you can click on these individual ones. I'll just show a couple more because they're kind of fun to look at.
Great.
So that people have an idea of what these sort of analyses can yield. And this is really just the beginning. We've only started toying with the data on a large level recently over the last few months. But this is one showing kind of, we were curious, well, which parts of the country are more efficient in which way? And the answer to that is it depends. It depends on what you're looking at and how you look at it. So for example, this is for gas usage. And you can see the blue is Massachusetts, the green is California. And Massachusetts is way higher than California, which makes sense when you consider the fact that most buildings in Massachusetts are gas heated, and California doesn't need a whole lot of heating. But if you switch this over to electric, then these are for buildings with electric with AC systems, window AC or building ACs.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that the median is about similar for Massachusetts and California, but there's a lot more buildings in California that use a lot more electricity. That's because California needs AC for a much greater portion of the year than Massachusetts does. Similarly, this is an interesting one. The water usage on a normalized basis is actually higher in Massachusetts, and that might speak to the fact that all the efforts that California puts in to conserve water during drought season, all that might be having an effect. So I would encourage folks who are watching to take a look at data.WegoWise. If nothing else, there's some really fun visualizations like this one. You can see how buildings are flocking in terms of their gas and electric use. But all of these are designed to convey something on a macro level of how buildings perform. Yeah.
That's great. So, I mean, you had mentioned that this is sort of a relatively new phase of the operation where you're actually finding broader applications and broader ways to look at the data, to collect the data, and also to present it. Whether you're a policymaker or just a concerned environmentalist or just somebody who's curious about the water usage in Massachusetts, for example. But what's next? Where do you see WegoWise extending in the near and medium terms?
Yeah, the way I look at it is, so there's what's next for us as a business, and there's what's next for where we want to drive the industry. And those two are very related, but they're slightly different. So as a business, we started, or as a product, I should say, we focused on specific aspects of the information flow for helping people make decisions about retrofits, but there is more. Basically, anywhere that there is information flow involved in the process of retrofitting a building, we think we can supply a better way to do it, and a more efficient and affordable way to do it that yields better results. So we're working on kind of new products or extensions to our product that fill in those gaps where there's just nothing in the marketplace right now to do it, and people are still doing things in Excel or having to switch from one tool to the other. From an industry perspective, our broader goal and where we're trying to move all of this is, like I said, getting more movement in the industry. We want to grow the industry as a whole. And so when we look at the things like what we have on data.WegoWise, that's not a monetization thing for us. We're not charging money for that. We are now able to understand things about buildings that nobody else has understood before because we have the data that people haven't had before. And we think that if we understand, the more we understand, the more we can drive action, the more we can drive policy, the more we can drive, show people that there are business opportunities in the industry for them to get into the space of retrofitting and auditing and all that. And so it's really focused around that and seeing, okay, who are the people who are not yet served by the tools that we currently offer, and how can we help them? How can we solve their pain points to drive more efficiency work as a whole, as a country, and as we start operating more internationally as a firm.
Great.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. And I know that we've definitely crossed over a little bit into our half-hour mark, so I want to bring this particular part of the broadcast to a close. I want to thank Barun Singh of WegoWise and Beth Schultz, our editor-in-chief here at All Analytics. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in and who sent in questions. I know that you will be able to see a recording and also continue asking your questions over at allanalytics.com. So, Barun, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Beth, signing off from lovely Chicago. Thank you so much for having taken the time today.
Thanks for organizing, Michael, and Barun, thanks for joining us. It's been really fascinating. I'm looking forward to playing around with those visualizations.
Exactly. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a little bit more of a spike in visitation just because of the three of us. But so on behalf of allanalytics.com, I'll thank everybody for joining us one more time. My name is Michael Steinhardt, and I hope you have a great and energy-efficient day. Thanks.